Welcome to E-Bible Fellowship's Bible Study. In this series of Bible studies, we'll be taking a closer look at the Bible's evidence for the completion of the prolonged Judgment Day and the end of the world occurring in the year 2033. And now here's your host and Bible teacher, Chris McCann.
Hello and welcome to E-Bible Fellowship's Bible Study as we're continuing to look in the biblical evidence for the end of the world in the year 2033. We've spent some time already showing from the Bible how the major indicators and signposts that the Lord Jesus Christ spoke of and foretold would be in place at the time of the end. We've shown how these things are abundantly in evidence in our time, primarily the apostasy of the church, which would include a great focus on their part on signs and wonders, and the abounding iniquity of the world, and that would also have to do with a great multiplication of population, which is in place. We haven't spent too much time discussing it, but also another major indicator was the fig tree being in leaf, national Israel, as Israel became a nation again in the year 1948. That indicates summer is nigh. And summer and harvest are synonymous, and that comes at the end. And so all these things are in place, firmly in place, clearly understood and seen by those who have eyes to see. I mean, we can't ask or expect for the unregenerate Christian, that is Christian in name only, not in heart, who lacks the Spirit of God and lacks spiritual life, to see spiritual evidence and truth. No, Christ didn't give the indicators. He didn't really give the signposts so that the ungodly would be able to see. It was the disciples of Christ who were asking the question in Matthew 24, "What shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world?" And Christ answered the disciples, and knowing that it would be the elect, the wise at the time of the end, who will understand. As it says in Daniel 12, the wise will understand. None of the wicked will understand. It's a hopeless matter to try and lay out biblical information, spiritual truth that God had hidden throughout much of history, but opened up at the time of the end, and laying it out before individuals who, again, have no eyes to see or ears to hear. They are in darkness and ignorance that brings, and so they cannot understand. They will not understand time and judgment. Only the wise man's heart discerneth time and judgment. And so when God brings judgment on the church, and the people of God declare the information that the Lord reveals from the Bible, the time has come, the time of Christ's visitation, judgment has begun at the house of God, time to get out, you must depart out. They look at you like you're crazy, or they speak of you as though you're a heretic. What are you talking about? They have no understanding. And then further, when the Lord opens up even more information, confirming the beginning of Judgment Day, May 21, 2011, Judgment Day, exclamation point, he confirmed it to that degree. that the people of God were certain. It was an absolute. And even as we look at the Bible now, that's the way the Bible presents it, with absolute certainty. And yet the same information is given to the wicked, and they don't believe it. They don't believe it. They dismiss it. No man knows. No man knows. You can't know. You see, that's why that Bible verse is so convenient for the church and for the world, and the world loves it just as much as the church, don't they? When they don't mind. The world doesn't normally go to the church for answers or for wisdom. If you've noticed, when there's matters that the church could have input on, you won't find the newscasters turning to the churches and saying, now, what is your position on this or that issue, so we might have some wisdom. No, they only if they know it's a position. Maybe it's a extremely far out church that would agree with the world. Then they might go on matters of transgenderism or same-sex marriage, that kind of a thing. But if the church is going to have a contrary opinion, they don't go there. And so when the Lord was having his people proclaim the message, the warning of Judgment Day approaching, the world, the secular world, and the news media especially, turn to the church professionals, to their seminary professors, to their pastors or priests. What do you say about this phenomenon taking place where these people are everywhere, it seems, saying a certain day, May 21, 2011, will be Judgment Day? What do you think about that? I would not concern myself with this at all. Don't worry. The Bible tells us no man knows the day or hour. And you see, the church got the news media got the sound bite it wanted. That's what it wanted to tell people to. Don't worry, people out there. You can't know according to the professional. You see, the church was working hand in hand with the wicked of the world, lest they might start to cry out to God, or they might begin to wonder about these things they were seeing everywhere. So the church served its corrupt purpose of comforting the ungodly and wicked of the world, who in their sins deep down know they're in trouble with God and should fear God and should fear Judgment Day, but the church soothe their fears, calm their fears. Oh, you have nothing to concern yourself about. We cannot know. And it happened again and again and again. What do you think the news outlet would have done if they went to someone who was an authority and they said, well, the Bible speaks of God sealing up the word at the time of the end, and this verse over here tells us the wise will understand in Daniel 12, and God here tells us that he reveals his secrets to his servants, the prophets, and would have soundly answered that question. How much of that would have made the news? Hardly a word. Hardly a word. But the world and their mouthpiece, the news media, got exactly what they wanted from another worldly institution, the corporate church. Yes, a worldly institution, because it was overcome by Satan, annexed. God gave it up. It wasn't God's institution anymore. Taken over by Satan, and so they can work hand in hand in these things. Well, anyway, we have talked about the signposts, and they are in place, and it's important to understand that, because if the signposts are not in place, if they're not evident, then when you go to lay the time information out, there's a mismatch. It just doesn't fit, because it's not yet the time of the end. But once they're in place, then you lay your time information out. It's sort of overlapping, and you have a perfect match. And that's the situation that we have. We have a perfect match with the signposts, the signs that will be in evidence. As Jesus answered the disciples, this is what you can look for, and the time. And the time, we find God also had sealed up until we reach the end of the world, the end stage of Earth's history, as the Lord opened up the eyes of Mr. Camping to see what was in the Bible the whole time. It did not originate with Mr. Camping. He didn't. It didn't come out of his mind. It is not from him. God simply opened up his understanding to the biblical calendar of history that was right before our eyes, or right before the eyes of all, the whole time on the pages of the Bible, in the genealogies, especially in the early chapters of Genesis, in Genesis chapters 5 and 10 and 11, and also a continuation of the lifespans of certain biblical patriarchs, where God gave key time information. So much time information that we can know the date for creation, the year that God created the world. And just think of it. That's incredible. That's incredible that we can know the exact year that God created the world. The world, they're so far off course, and it's laughable. They're so far away. The world used to say the world is millions of years old. That's how it was when I was growing up, in the 60s and the 70s, and the evolutionists, they thought the world was millions of years old and maybe hundreds of millions. But now we have entered into the same scientists, or same scientific community, not the same men, who now say that the world is billions of years old. Billions of years. That the universe is billions of years, and the world is very ancient, very old. And this, of course, is based on, some of it is based on the number of light years that certain stars are out there, and they can measure. I don't know how accurately they measure, but they say they can measure the number of light years, and it's in the billions. It's in the billions. So there is the proof. There's the evidence that the universe is billions of years old. But they forget one very simple truth, and that is, we find, and this would be a good thing, I think, for us to discuss before we get into telling the actual age of the earth. If we go to Genesis chapter 1, when God created Adam, we read in verse 26 of Genesis 1, and God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. And then God, very shortly thereafter, he says in Genesis 2, in verse 18, and Jehovah God said, it is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helpmeet for him. Now the ground, Jehovah God formed every beast of the field. And then down in verse 21, and Jehovah God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and he slept, and he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh instead thereof. And the rib which Jehovah God had taken from man made he a woman, and brought her unto the man. And Adam said, this is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Then it continues, and we know the serpent appears in the next chapter, and he lies to Eve, and they fall into sin. When God created Adam, did he create him as a little baby? No, he did not. That wouldn't have been really feasible, because Adam had no one to care for him. And little babies, they need a caretaker. They need a mother and a father to do everything for them initially, and to feed them and keep them warm and clean them and everything. But there are no other people. Adam is the first man. Eve is the first woman. And so God wisely did not create little babies when he made man from the dust of the ground, but he made a fully grown man. Adam was a fully grown man, and Eve, made from Adam's rib, was a fully grown woman. That's the only way it would have been possible for them to enter into marriage right away. And it was also necessary that they marry right away, because they had a job of populating the world, the new creation. And that would require having children. And in the Bible, of course, only people who are properly married in the sight of God are to have sexual relations in the marriage bed and children. So how does this relate to how old the earth is and how old the universe is? Well, it's a very simple thing, that Adam is created a fully grown man, and he would have been a young man, or given the appearance of a young man, at maybe 20 years old. That's a good age. You're mature, your mind is mature, and Adam's mind was sharp. We find him saying, this is now bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh. And that is, a day or two into his existence. He was just created, and he has a fully functioning vocabulary. He didn't have to learn his ABCs. He didn't have to learn words with sign cards or anything like that. God gave him intelligence. God inserted within him a language skill and a vocabulary, definitions, meaning. He knew the meaning of these words. He applied it appropriately, perfectly, to the creation of the woman who would be his wife. And we shouldn't think he's saying words without meaning. And you see all that God has done for him in the initial creation. we would expect he would not be able to have the stature or size that he has in being a man. He would not have speaking ability. He would not have understanding or knowledge of words, even the most basic words, given he's only been in existence for a few days, perhaps. And yet he knows all these things. And if someone were to look on him, if you or I or anyone were able to see Adam from the first moment of his creation, if we're looking across the garden, and there we see a man standing. There is Adam standing, and now at this point, and there's Eve. Adam and Eve are together, this young couple. What would you guess would be their age? Well, I would think, again, it's speculation, but obviously they were adult. So I would, and more than likely young appearing adult, as age itself and the the effects of age, the wrinkles that came later after the curse, and so I would say, well, they look to be 20 years old. They look to be 20 years old, and yet they were 2 days old. 2 days old. So what does that tell us? That God can create something. And man is a very complicated creature. God can create a creature with the appearance of age already. They were not 20 years old. They were hours or a couple of days, 48 hours old. And same thing with the universe. Very simple answer to why the stars out there are billions of light years away, and we see the light. No, it didn't take billions of years of time for the light to reach us. But when God created the universe, and he created the star, or all the stars whose lights we see at night, even the furthest out there that we can see, and again, when they measure, well, it would take billions of years for that light to reach us. No, from the beginning, when God created, as we read in Genesis 1, in verse 14, and God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. In verse 15, and let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth. And it was so. Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven. And it goes on to say in verse 16, and God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. Like an afterthought. Such a great God, such an awesome, almighty being is God. Yes, I made the two great lights, the sun and the moon, and the greater light to rule the day, the lesser light to rule the night, and, by the way, the stars also. These incredible creations that God has made are all part of this one whole tremendous creation. And he made the stars, and those stars are part of the statement to give light upon the earth, and it was so. It was so. As soon as he made them. As soon as he made them. And so how old would the star be? Now, if you were able to analyze the star and take a piece of the star or figure out the distance the star is from the earth, and how long it takes light to travel, and calculate that way, you would come up with an enormous number, and you would say, this is how old the earth is because we can see that light, and it took so long for that light to reach our eyes. And you would be absolutely wrong and way far off than an estimate of Adam's 20 years. That estimate is pretty bad, 20 years rather than 2 days. And yet the scientists are enormously far off. I mean, there's being wrong by a hair. I'm just off. And then there's being wrong in the scientific world by billions of years because they don't believe the Bible, trust the Bible, they don't consider the Bible, and it throws off their science incredibly so, and they end up coming up with ridiculous conclusions that are just to be dismissed. They're to be dismissed by the elect child of God. The world, of course, is taken by the brilliance of the scientific community and these things. The world loves lies. The world loves deceitfulness. It's easy to deceive the people of the world. They have not the spirit of truth. They reject the spirit of truth. They reject truth in general. Christ said in John 8:45, "You do not believe me because I tell you the truth." And the implication is they do believe those who do not tell them the truth. And we see that all over the place. Well, that is the first important principle. It's a biblical principle. We trust God, we trust the Bible, and God has given us the accurate timeline for the creation of the world as well as the creation of the universe. All is created in 6 days. And so it was all done in that year, and I'll mention the year, 11,013 BC was the year that God created the world and the universe.
Thank you for joining us for E-Bible Fellowship's Evening Bible Studies with your host and Bible teacher, Chris McCann. For more studies and information, visit our website at www.ebiblefellowship.org. Until our next Bible study, may the Lord's perfect will be done.